Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Joining us in just a minute will be first-time guest Andrew Kahn. He is our Hoops beat writer from MLive. First, a few of my thoughts to get us going. It might be brutally cold outside, but it is heating up in Big Ten hoops. Tonight, Ohio State rolls into Chrysler, and they are fresh off a big road win against Nebraska. We, on the other hand, went on the road Friday night and took it to IU at Assembly Hall. It was the largest margin of victory for Michigan ever in Bloomington. Tonight, the January portion of the schedule concludes, and what a February this could be for Michigan basketball. I, for one, am really enjoying the season. As I told Andrew during the interview, every week I ask myself this question: how is this team 19-1? And I don't mean that as a jab at the team, because the offense has been good, but not great. Defense is the reason this team has one loss. What intrigues me is this offense. I don't think we've seen this team hit their stride on offense, which is scary if you're on Michigan's schedule. This offense so often doesn't seem to be in sync for segments of games, but they still win because of defense. What if the offense comes together in February, is more consistent, and in sync? That is a scary thought. And that's what excites me about February. It's going to be another fun stretch run, and if history under Coach B is a teacher, the best is yet to come. My guest today agrees with me. He doesn't think this team has peaked yet. Beat writer Andrew Kahn from MLive is up next here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. With us on our game day segment this week for the first time is a gentleman who covers U of M hoops. I'm sure you're all aware of Andrew Kahn from MLive. Andrew, great to have you with us.
Mike, thanks for having me.
Well, it is the end of the month, very busy time of the year in Big Ten action, college basketball action. Let's talk about what happened Friday night in Bloomington, Andrew. Indiana needed a W in a big way. They are on a skid right now. They were home at Assembly, but man, Michigan right out of the gate took it to them, didn't they?
They did. I've got a lot of several friends that are interested in point spreads. Let's put it that way. And they reach out to me saying, "What's the deal with this number? Why is Michigan only favored by, I think it was like 3 or 4?" I just usually say, "I don't know. I'd stay away if I were you." That's usually my advice. And then the game started, and you're like, "Oh, well, geez, yeah, maybe they were wrong on this." But I think that number speaks to what you were saying, is that Indiana was desperate for a win. They're still talented. They've got a freshman in Romeo Langford, who many believe will be a lottery pick in the next NBA draft. They've got a big man inside in Jawan Morgan that is just a double machine and had a big game against Michigan in the previous matchup. But Michigan just took it to them. I mean, they hit them in the face early, and it didn't stop. And then when Indiana made its inevitable push, Michigan pushed right back, and that's really what John Beilein was most proud of his team for, was knowing that run would come from Indiana, and Michigan didn't blink. They hit some big shots, mostly 3-pointers by a variety of different players, and then defensively what they did on Indiana's stars was impressive as well. Michigan gets a big road win. Any win on the road is big. And then sort of put the bad taste in their mouth behind them from, only one loss, but 2 games where certainly offensively they didn't look great.
When I was watching the game on Friday night, the crew threw out a stat that sort of blew me away. All of the years I've been watching Michigan basketball, I've always known, we know, you play at Assembly Hall, it is one tough venue, whether IU is good or mediocre. It's just a tough place to win. But they said that is the largest margin of victory for Michigan ever playing there in Indiana.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that is impressive. I didn't have that in my game story. That was a nice little tidbit to include. That is impressive. And yeah, it is a tough place. I mean, it was my first visit there. It's quite the climb up to the media seating, but that sort of gets you the perspective of it kind of shoots straight up. So fans, they always say fans are right on top of you. I mean, they kind of are. It's like the exact opposite of Michigan Stadium, where there's sort of this bowl effect. It just goes straight up, and there are seats that are close, and they are loud, and they're very passionate about their basketball, as I think people know who even haven't been there. So yeah, it was an environment that Michigan had to battle, and they did it admirably. I mean. Indiana's coach had no Archie Miller, said right away, I don't know how you come out like that. Speaking of his team, in that environment. So he understood that it seemed like it should have been a real, home crowd, home team advantage. But Michigan negated that right away.
Well, they say you need to win at home when you're looking at a conference race, split on the road to stay in the race. And so far, anyway, Michigan 3-1 on the road. That's a great start, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, this is something that started. They had their impressive run last year, and they had a very good road record. I'd say even even the year before, when they started, I think it was 4-6 in conference play, but then they finished so strong, including getting some nice road wins. I mean, I know they won at Indiana that year because it's been 5 or 6 straight, and then they closed with a dominating win at Nebraska. I mean, that's kind of been now, I think, part of the culture of this program, and they just sort of added pieces over the years. Now it's sort of the whole defensive thing, and but winning on the road has certainly been sort of the next piece. That's what you have to do if you want to be an elite team in your conference, and Michigan and one or two other teams can stake that claim these last few years.
Well, you mentioned, and I believe it was a Saturday morning article in MLive, how nice it is to have a lockdown defender in Charles Matthews. And he delivered big time against Romeo Langford, didn't he?
He really did. I mean, I do, I asked them specifically, the advice you'd give to, a young player whose shots aren't falling, how they could still impact the game, because he did have a fine offensive game against Indiana, but there have been plenty of games in the past where he hasn't, and yet the defense is just always there. And he's not really the only guy like that. Certainly Xavier Simpson, I think you can say that about. But he doesn't hang his head. And then he's got, certainly the physical tools, the athletic gifts, to be truly elite. But, he doesn't really mention those things when he talks about his own, defensive skills. He talks about, effort and want to, and, film study and, just energy level and things like that. But, his coaches just rave about what, he does defensively. And, you saw it on Friday night. I mean, Langford getting in early foul trouble certainly, didn't help Indiana. But when he was out on the floor, Matthews absolutely neutralized him. And if you can do that with this Indiana team right now, that's sort of a two-man show with their injuries and just other issues they've got going on. You're going to beat them. And if you can, limit both of them, then you're going to beat them big. And that's exactly what Michigan did.
Well, as you said, the coaching staff at Michigan and the opposition players and coaching staffs talk about how tough Charles Matthews' defense is. But, I think Michigan fans want to see more on the offensive end. It is what it is with him, but again, he delivered big time. But do you think, from a Michigan fan perspective, that defense of his is an underappreciated piece of his game?
Probably. I mean, I think that's probably true of, just defense in general. People like the guys that are scoring points. They're not necessarily noticing how many they're, giving up on the other end. But, if you got a couple guys that, even if they only get 10, 12 points, but they're limiting their guy by, that much under their average, I mean, you start just doing the math on these things and you can see why they're, 19-1. So yeah, I would definitely say he's underappreciated, because I think it does get back to some of his, the shot selection and his shooting percentage. It's not where, he and certainly John Beeline would like it to be. I mean, that's no secret. That he believes he's a capable 3-point shooter. This is Beeline, speaking of his player, thinks Matthews can, knock down outside shots, but when he can get to the rim and finish, he wants to see him do that. He wants to see him have confidence with that sort of elbow jumper and not fade away as much when he gets into the paint. But defensively, there's really nothing to complain about with him.
I know I read, I think it was in one of your pieces, where he looked over at the bench late in the game on Friday night against Indiana, and the reaction from the bench, I don't know if it was Coach Beeline himself, it was like, come on, pick it up. You've got to get more involved. And he really did, though.
Yeah, I mean, against Indiana, it was after he got, he took that shot to the back of the head. And then he really, he went on a little personal 7-0 run scoring. I think he hit a three, he had a couple foul shots, he had a mid-range. He was doing it all. Because, there was a little stretch there where Michigan's offense went dormant. And he certainly he got them going. He's one of the leaders on this team, one of the co-captains, and he's having a very good final collegiate season.
Well, Iggy Brazdeikis broke out of his slump on Friday. Granted, it was only maybe a 2 or 3 game slump. One thing you can say about this kid, though, Andrew, is he doesn't stop taking shots. He keeps on being aggressive, whether it's driving the paint or even popping threes if they're not falling. He has really a tough mental makeup, doesn't he?
He absolutely does. I mean, that was evident really as soon as he stepped foot on campus. Whenever you got to meet the kid, whether it was for me it was in Spain, but if not, it was media day or as soon as these games started, it was very clear that he's built a little differently than most freshmen, both physically and his mental makeup. He is extremely confident in his abilities, and he takes individual matchups personally, and he's just he's a very well-rounded player. And you say he keeps shooting. I mean, that for the most part has been true, which is why that Wisconsin game was so strange, because he did go into a bit of a shell. I think he only took 5 shots in that game.
Yeah.
Which, if it wasn't a season low, it was certainly among their close games. It was a season low. He might have had 5 or 4 in one of their real blowouts. But again, got in some foul trouble in that game that didn't help him. But he bounced back. Minnesota, very aggressive, but maybe not as efficient. And then Indiana, incredibly efficient. He hits his first 3 and he was just rolling from there. You sort of saw the old Iggy, which is funny because it's just, again, like you said, it was really just a week of games, a couple of them. It wasn't like, he was in this major month-long slump. He wouldn't have even called what he was in a slump. And that's part of, I think, what makes him a special player.
Well, and he's not even been around a year yet. He's a freshman, and we're learning about him. But one thing I think we've learned already is he does not get uptight. Very animated kind of a kid, too, with his money signs, et cetera, really gets into the game. And like he said, he loves the hate he gets on the road. I mean, he's a character, isn't he, Andrew?
He really is. I mean, he's, I guess he's sort of a sports writer's dream in that sense. I mean, I'm never one that's like, all right, I'm going to, what can I ask him? What crazy thing might he say? But, a lot of these things many of these things are unprompted. He is a character. He reminds me of Mo Wagner in many ways. And his response saying he loves being hated was in response to the fact that he wears number 13, much like Mo. And he wanted that pressure that came with wearing that number when he came to Michigan. So, they're both players that weren't born in the United States, good offensive skill sets, and just very, they're able to sort of step back. You ask a lot of players, how far can this team go? And it's a question that, if you're on a team in the top 25, like, you probably think you can win it all. But most players would just say, we're going to keep trying to improve, and, who knows what might happen at the end. He says, I think we can win it all. There's no reason we can't win this whole thing. So that's just, he's honest about these things in a way that's just sort of disarming and genuine and refreshing.
Well, another player who was big on Friday, and he's been big all year, is John Teske in a lot of ways. I think he surprised observers, and a lot of writers say he is the straw that stirs the drink, so to speak. Have you been surprised at what he has given the team so far, Andrew, on both ends of the floor?
Absolutely. I mean, he's a guy, I put Xavier Simpson in that category, but given that Simpson started last year, not as much so. Teske is the guy that, opposing coaches just single out right away, as a guy that has just taken great strides and is just sort of an example of the player development that's happening at Michigan. I mean, 2 years ago, the guy, couldn't really get on the floor. He didn't redshirt only because, they decided to redshirt, another guy in his class, Austin Davis. But, just played a couple minutes here and there when it was absolutely necessary because of foul trouble. Last year, still backing up Mo, comes in for spot minutes. You saw the defense, that's something he could do sort of, right away. And now this year with the threes and the mid-range and, again, he's not a guy that they throw the ball into regularly. That's just not really Michigan style. But, very efficient offensively. And then defensively, we talk about Matthews and we can talk about Simpson and really just the team defense. But having a guy like Teske at the back line is just so huge. And, I use that word. He is 7'1", 260 pounds, and he uses that. He's a real, rim protector. He's still not blocking a ton of shots, but I think he did have a few, in the last few games he's increased that number. But again, it's more about just altering shots. Some guys won't even shoot at all. They'll kick out. He's an unbelievable presence. He moves his feet well in ball screen coverage. That's another thing coaches always point out that, they're not going to intentionally switch him onto a point guard, but, if it happens for a few seconds in a possession, he can hold his own. So he really is an extremely versatile player. And, you've seen it in the game, some of the games where he has foul trouble. Michigan has to scramble a bit. They have Isaiah Livers, they have Brandon Johns that they can turn to for spot minutes, but you want Teske out there, and he hits the floor. I mean, how many 7-footers do you see, diving for loose balls? He's done it multiple times this season. So very impressive player, and another very just humble kid that doesn't like talking about himself and always focused on the next game and, another team first guy.
Well, we're getting a lot from him, and we're getting a lot from Xavier Simpson, too. He's such a player that I like more and more all of the time. The defensive part, that's obvious. Everyone talks about that, and everyone talks about his free throw shooting and his three-point shooting. It's not great. We know that. But the important thing is he's really become a very good quarterback for this offense, hasn't he?
He has. I mean, it's been less about what he can't do and just more about what he can, because he brings so much to this team, and you saw it against Indiana. I mean, he's got the ball on a string. He, like you said, he's a quarterback. He's seeing everybody else out there. He knows what they're doing, and he gets it to them in great spots, which is really what you want your point guard to do. Would you rather him, be a better outside shooter, and certainly the free throw shooting? Yes, but I mean, geez, he gives so much defensively. He gives so much, sharing the ball, setting guys up, that he really is. He's playing at just such a high level, and certainly looking like a strong candidate for one of the defensive players of the year. The defensive player of the year in the Big Ten. So yeah, I mean, I love what Simpson brings. Again, a guy who doesn't have to score, that many points. He had the breakout game the second time around against Northwestern, but he's had plenty of games where he's only scored, 2 or 4 points, but he's dished out double-digit assists. He's like Derek Walton. He has this knack for defensive rebounding. He's had several, 7-8 rebound games. So yeah, his growth has been important for this Michigan team for sure.
And that's the thing with him, Andrew. I think a lot of fans, as you said, and I think sometimes you would like him to be a better shooter, but I mean, it is what it is right now. But the reality is this team doesn't need him to do that to win.
No, absolutely. And I think that's what makes this team so good. You see, their true peak potential when he and John Teske injuries, like in that game against Northwestern. But I think the bigger key is that teams, a performance like that, you'd think would prevent teams from playing that kind of defense that Northwestern did, which is just daring him to shoot. Because if a team does that and he's not hitting them, then it's kind of problematic. But, if they're just respecting the shot, it just opens up so much more for him and his teammates. So yeah, absolutely. I think he's just bringing, so much to the table for this team, and he's sort of his teammates are taking a cue from him, and that there's no one on this team that feels they need to get a certain number of shots, every game, and I think that's really part of the secret sauce for Michigan this year. We're not we're not in the locker room, every day. I don't want to try to say like I truly know, the inner thoughts of every guy on this team. But what I do try to do as a beat writer is, kind of get as close to that truth as I can. And I do feel like this team is very connected, and they're very unselfish in that, again, guy only gets, 5 shots, or maybe he'll get 15 shots. There's not really a lot of complaining, one way or the other.
With us here on our Game Day segment this week is Andrew Kahn from MLive, who's a beat writer covering Michigan hoops. Andrew, there are times I watch this team, and this is from the beginning, and I ask myself the same question every time. I'm asking it now. How are they 19-1? And I come back to the same answer every time: defense. That is the reason this team has only lost once, isn't it?
Well, it absolutely is. I think, these things change, by the hour as more games get played. I think they're up to number 2 in Ken Palm, which, adjusts for, the strength of your opponents in defensive efficiency. And yeah, there's plenty of games this year. I mean, go back to the first two. The first 2 games, Norfolk State and Holy Cross, they probably beat Norfolk State anyway, but I'm not sure that they were going to pull away from Holy Cross if it wasn't for the way they locked down on defense in that game. Then there's plenty of other games, even the games they win by 20, 30 points. It all started with defense, turning defense into offense. And then you've got some of the other games that were tighter than you'd expect, but again, the defense was pretty much always there. There was that little spell there towards the end of non-conference where, the defense sort of took a little bit of a step back starting with that South Carolina game, but, another great, performance against Indiana, even the Wisconsin game. I mean, you'll look at some of the factors in that game. You get no points from your leading scorer. You go, I think it was 5 for 18 from 3. You don't shoot well from the foul line. You have a decent first half from Jordan Poole, and that's about it. And yet that game really went down to the final minute. You lose by 10, but only because of the circumstances with the intentional foul and things like that. So they were right in it on the road against a good team without much offense at all. And Mike, I think you're absolutely right. It speaks to the defense. Something that John Beilein wanted to emphasize. Now, I guess you go back 2-3 seasons ago, the hiring of a new assistant coach, and Billy Donlin and Luke Yaklich has just sort of, taken that to the next level, and they've got the personnel to do it. Coaches always say defense goes on the road. It can cover a multitude of offensive sins, especially on an off night. The good thing is it can also let your offense develop. And, something tells me, Andrew, one of the scary things about this team, if you're an opposing coach, or if you're scouting this team, I don't think they've reached their offensive potential yet. I have a feeling they're going to be better down this stretch. Do you see that as a possibility? Yeah, absolutely. I think that the 19-1 start has sort of made people forget, a lot of fans forget, like, what they think of John Beilein, which is that his teams usually get better as the season goes. I mean, I think it was easy for them to, sort of take comfort in that and have that as your security blanket when, the team started, 14-9 or whatever it was a couple of years ago, or, even last year where, coming off that the final game that they did lose to Northwestern, they weren't exactly in the hunt for, the number 3 seed that they ended up getting in the NCAA tournament. So, if you see that growth, that progression, that evolution offensively that you have seen over the last several years with John Beilein or over the course of his career, again this year, then, geez, the sky's the limit because we already see what the defense is. We've gotten a taste of sort of what they can be offensively. But I absolutely think they have not peaked. I think one of the areas that they can improve in, and Beilein has talked about this, is turning defense into offense. When you're this good at forcing missed shots and this good at defensive rebounding, they're way up there in the country in both those categories. You kind of have to be good in transition because there's just going to be so many opportunities. They're not turning over teams a ton, but they're still above average in that regard. So yeah, they have to be better, and that's been a priority for the team. Beilein said recently. So you start doing that a little bit more, and then geez, you don't even have to. You just make life a little bit easier on yourself. You don't have to run set offense against a set defense, because you're getting out and running. So some of that, some of just development from some of the players. It's still as much as Xavier Simpson and John Teskey are household names now for Michigan. They're still, in Teskey's case, his first year starting. Simpson, a year and a half in. You got a freshman in the starting lineup. I think absolutely there's room for improvement for this team. I think you'll see it, and I think you'll have to see it if they want to keep pace in the Big Ten, because the schedule doesn't let up. That's for sure.
I've stopped being amazed what a job Coach B does year in and year out, sort of putting the puzzle together. We're more used to seeing, as you said, it happen at the end of the season. You lose a few here, you lose a few there in January and February, and it comes together. But this year, it's just been amazing what he's done, and he's showing us all again what a great coach he is. And I'm not sure we really appreciate that yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to speak for the whole fan base, but I would think that last year would have changed that for Michigan fans. You'd think, winning a second straight Big Ten tournament championship, getting all the way to the national championship. I don't know. Maybe there's some out there that he's got to win it all. Or they want another regular season title or whatever it may be, or maybe they just want to see better recruits come here, even though the ones he gets he turns into NBA players. So I don't know. I'm not sure what you'd want, because I don't think anyone could deny the sort of the off court stuff has been exactly what you want. No players making headlines for the wrong reasons. Guys graduating. And no scandals in a college basketball world that has plenty of them. So I absolutely think they showed. It was an interesting conversation I was having with another beat writer recently. About if you look at John Beilein's record those first few years, would he survive in sort of today's climate? I mean, he got to the NCAA tournament his second year, but 2 out of the first 3 he did not. Early exits all in those first 5 or 6 years before, they made that deep run in 2013. You don't know. He would have been afforded that, that time that most coaches do need. But I think, a large majority of Michigan fans are happy that he was.
Well, Tuesday night, Ohio State visits Chrysler. They're fresh off a big Nebraska win. Do you think the Buckeyes match up pretty well against Michigan? I think they match up okay. I don't think Michigan will take them lightly. It's a rivalry game. I don't think I wouldn't circle this as a loss on their schedule. I mean, certainly any of the games at home. This has been something that Michigan. This is one of their stated goals, was to win all their home games. Ohio State certainly righted the ship with that road win after I think they had lost 4 or 5 in a row before that. It's a 9:00 start. We'll see what the weather's like, as far as how many fans are in the building, what the energy is like, because it wasn't great in the last home game for the weather certainly played a role. Ohio State certainly has some talented players. I think Chris Holtmann is a very good coach. He showed that last year. I think Michigan will have to be focused to win, but I think they keep pace with their in-state rival, and stay on top of the Big Ten. Well, got to protect home court advantage, and then after Tuesday, we open February on the road at Iowa and then Rutgers. And we know life on the road in the Big Ten, it is brutal this year. It is every year, but it seems to be particularly brutal this year, Andrew.
No, absolutely. Rutgers has picked off a couple teams already, and they're, I think what most people would say, towards the bottom of the league, still a program that's rebuilding. They've already picked up a couple of wins, in the Big Ten. So I don't think any on the road are easy. Certainly, Penn State's looking pretty down. You still would expect Michigan to win those games, but it's tough. But I think Michigan has some things going for them. The defense, like you said, travels. Just sort of a veteran team. As much as Beilein doesn't believe that, he's still got a redshirt junior, a couple juniors, a couple sophomores, several returning starters from a team that made such a deep run last year. So I think both of those things help them when they go on the road, maybe more so than other teams.
Well, a final question for you, Andrew. Every time I have one of the beat writers on, I like to ask him this question in the last couple of weeks. And I know you haven't seen every team yet, especially that team over in East Lansing. But right now, as we near the midway point of conference play, does anyone stand out to you as the team to beat in the Big Ten?
It is a tough one. And again, I do, when you are a beat writer, you are really focused on your team. I like to know Michigan really well. I know, the rest of the Big Ten pretty well. And see some of these other teams I haven't even gotten a chance to see. But, it's 1 and 1A, but, who you say that is, it sort of just depends on which day. Today you might say it's Michigan's the top dog because Michigan State just lost. But Michigan State also it was sort of I don't coaches don't like this term, but sort of a scheduling loss given just how many games they had stacked up in a short period of time. Running into a hot Purdue team. So I think given that Michigan State is doing this without a very key player in Josh Langford. And has had, one or two guys out for other games, including, the game against Purdue. That's been even more impressive. I guess a fair question would be, are they going to necessarily be better, when they're at full strength? Because, it's hard to look much better than they've looked. You look at the chemistry, shot distribution, things like that. So I realize I've probably talked for 30 seconds here and completely dodged the question, but it's a tough call. I love that they're playing twice. It's kind of interesting that it's so late in the season for both. It's going to be two fully formed or close to it products at that point. I don't know, kind of would have been nice to have one like now, and then again another one later, but so be it. Baby steps. Last year you only got the one regular season matchup. Now that's been rectified. So the fact that they're both so late in the season, we'll take it for now. For now, I guess I'd say at this point I'd give the edge to the home team in those two matchups. They go about it differently, but both elite teams right now, worthy of their top 10 ranking in the country.
Joining us on our game day segment this week has been beat writer Andrew Kahn from MLive. First time on the show, and Andrew, we're heading into after this week into February, and it's going to be the meat grinder portion of the schedule. So we appreciate you coming on for the first time, and we look forward to getting you back in February and seeing what's happening.
Mike, happy to do it. Thanks again.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Quick Hits today, Coach Barnes-Arico and the ladies keep fighting through this season of rebuilding. They lost at home to Michigan State on Sunday, 77-73. Thursday, they stay at home to take on Iowa, then back on the road Sunday against Wisconsin. At this point, an NCAA berth appears to be a dream, but an NIT berth is still possible. They need a strong finish, though. We are 12-9 overall, 3-6 in Big Ten play. Hockey continues their season of struggle. We split a pair with Penn State last week, prevailing at home on Thursday 5-1, then losing over the weekend 5-2 at Madison Square Garden. This week it's on the road for a pair in Madison. Never an easy place to pick up points. We are 9-10-6 overall, 5-6-4 in Big Ten action. As cold as it is in Michigan right now, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, it hasn't been much of a winter so far, but the last week is kind of making up for it. Spring is not far away, though. If you are a Michigan softball and baseball fan, that is. Softball opens the season next Friday, February 8th in Florida in the Wilson D. Marini Tournament. Baseball swings into action the next weekend against Binghamton down in Port St. Lucie, so hang in there. I hope to have a Michigan Man Extra for you in January with Steve Lorenz, but Steve's schedule was a bit crazy with the February signing date coming up, so we'll try and schedule him for our Extra in February. Don't forget our free show app is available from the iTunes and Google Play stores. You can also get the show on Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, and Wolverine Sports Radio. That will do it for another week. Thanks as always for joining me, and please tell your friends and family about the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until next time, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!